We treat intelligence like a hardwired destiny. We rank children by test scores, we screen job applicants with brain teasers, and we assume a high number guarantees success. But relying on a single metric to measure human worth comes with severe blind spots. And in 1966, the United States government tested that theory by gambling with human lives. The Vietnam War was steadily slipping out of America's grasp. Inside the Pentagon, the spreadsheets were flashing red. The military was burning through soldiers and weapons, and they were rapidly running out of draftable men who met the standard testing requirements. The crisis landed on the desk of Defense Secretary Robert McNamara. Before the Pentagon, McNamara was a senior executive at Ford Motor Company. He was an expert at optimizing systems and increasing factory output. To him, a chaotic battlefield was a logistical puzzle. You don't need the smartest men to win a war, you just need to manage your resources perfectly. He launched Project 100,000. The military lowered its cognitive standards to draft men from categories 4 and 5, individuals with an IQ between 70 and 80. McNamara structured the military like an assembly line. High IQ officers would act as the brains, making the strategic decisions, while these newly drafted lower IQ soldiers would act as the hands, strictly following standardized operating procedures. To get the public on board, McNamara pitched this as an act of social uplift. He theorized that pulling these men out of poverty and plunging them into the intense, high-pressure environment of combat would force their brains to adapt. According to the Defense Department, the war would upgrade their intelligence. The data from the jungle proved otherwise. Military records revealed that these specific soldiers died at roughly 3 times the rate of standard troops. They suffered double the incidence of friendly fire, and mental trauma cases spiked. A factory assembly line relies on predictable environments. A firefight is entirely unpredictable. Treating human intelligence as a simple administrative variable created a lethal bottleneck the moment those soldiers stepped into the chaos of survival. To understand why the Pentagon's math failed, we have to look at how we measure intelligence in the first place. In 1905, French psychologist Alfred Binet designed the first intelligence test. His goal was compassionate. He wanted a practical tool to identify children who were struggling in school so teachers could give them extra help. Binet explicitly warned that his test should never be used as a permanent label. But when the test reached American psychologists like Louis Terman and Henry Goddard, they stripped away the nuance. They believed intelligence was rigid and genetically hard-coded. They took Binet's helpful tool and weaponized it, using the scores to invent a brand new, supposedly clinical classification for low scores: morons. Once a label looks like hard science, institutions use it to justify cruelty. By 1927, the U.S. government legally shielded mass sterilization programs aimed at low IQ citizens, claiming it would optimize society. Tens of thousands of Americans were forcibly sterilized under these eugenics policies. But modern neurobiology paints a completely different picture. An IQ test primarily measures fluid intelligence. That is, your brain's ability to look at a completely random, unknown problem, strip away the noise, and quickly identify a structured pattern without relying on memorized knowledge. IQ doesn't dictate a person's permanent biological destiny. It takes a highly specific snapshot of the processing speed inside particular networks of your brain. When you encounter a new problem, your parietal cortex, the area that handles spatial thinking, communicates directly with your prefrontal cortex, the center for logical rules. Together, they form the frontoparietal network. The bottleneck for this network is your working memory. A brain with an average IQ can comfortably hold 3 to 4 variables in its working memory at once to run calculations. A brain with a lower IQ typically taps out at 2 to 3 variables. During a low-stakes training exercise, holding 2 variables in your head is entirely sufficient. But step into the Vietnam jungle, and reality instantly throws 6 or 7 variables at you. Gunfire from the left, uneven terrain, a radio command barking in your ear, smoke obscuring your vision, a wounded teammate on the ground. When the incoming variables wildly exceed the capacity of your working memory, you can't abstract the data. The brain becomes overloaded. It can't separate the noise from the critical signals. This is exactly what happened to the men drafted under Project 100,000. They didn't panic because they lacked courage. Their neurological processors literally froze. Veterans reported seeing these soldiers load the same weapon multiple times, step out of cover, or fire blindly in the wrong direction. You cannot design a standard operating procedure that overrides biology. Under intense crisis, high-stakes stress shrinks working memory capacity by nearly 50%. So if low IQ creates such a severe vulnerability, then extreme high IQ must guarantee extreme success, right? In 1921, Louis Terman, one of the psychologists who popularized the test, started a 60-year study tracking 1,500 children. Every single child had a staggering IQ over 135. Decades later, the results rolled in. The termites lived stable, highly educated, upper-middle-class lives. They became doctors, managers, and professors. But not one of those 1,500 verified geniuses produced a world-changing discovery. 0 Nobel Prizes. But 2 children who were tested for that exact study and rejected because their IQs were too low grew up to be William Shockley and Luis Alvarez. Both won Nobel Prizes in physics. Then you have Richard Feynman, widely considered one of the greatest historical geniuses in physics. Feynman took the test. His IQ sat right around 120. This is a chart showing the correlation between IQ scores and real-world output. The data reveals an uncomfortable truth for the strict believers. A high IQ is incredibly useful for acquiring complex skills quickly, but the advantage flattens out entirely right around the 120 mark. Once your working memory is wide enough to handle the data, raw processing speed stops giving you an edge. Past that threshold, intelligence mutates. It becomes about where you point your focus. It relies on creativity, adaptability, and how you apply the facts you've gathered. IQ measures the biological speed limit of your mind when faced with an abstract puzzle, but your actual impact on the world depends on the direction you choose to drive. And as history continually proves, you cannot reduce human potential to a simple variable on a military spreadsheet. If you've made it this far, thanks for watching. Please consider subscribing to Deep Dive Daily, hitting that like button, and dropping a comment below.